Okay, it's third week of May. We have a new project, don't we, Lila? Yeah. And it starts with Western red cedar. A lot of Western red cedar. About 60 board feet or more of Western red cedar. I have a little bit of Eastern white cedar in here as well. And I'm going to be machining this, milling it up, and doing some more work with it. And then, once I get that done, I'm taking over Lisa's garage. And she's not entirely happy about that. But it's all for the cause. So stick around, see what we do. See how much Lila helps. Starting to trace out the forms, and I just did the first one without even thinking. Here's the plans for the canoe, and you can see that, well, maybe you can't, but on here there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different shapes that need to be traced out, cut out, and then transferred to plywood. And there's an additional one that's here that will be the stem and the stern. And what I do is, and I'll show you that in just a minute, I place the form over this paper and I trace it out with carbon paper. And you can see that the form comes out looking something like that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out with a pair of scissors, and then I will transfer it from this to a piece of plywood. I could probably do this right on the plywood, but this is my first time, so I'm just kind of taking it easy and trying to figure things out as I go along. Well, you just saw me trace out frames 4 and 6. And I'm going to note that right here in the center. And you may have noticed that I didn't complete it. So where there are straight lines, all I did was put the mark. And now what I'll do is take the straight edge and connect the marks. And finally, for the long one, I've got a drywall square that I'll place in here. And that's it. Now, Now the plans for this boat actually come out of a book called Building a Strip Canoe, 2nd edition. It's by Gilpatrick. He's from the Master Main, well, it's called the Master Main Guide, and Gilpatrick wrote this book. That, in addition to another book that's sitting over on the table, I've been using to kind of learn how to do this. And this plan that I'm using right now is for one canoe called the Wabanaki. And I'm using his method as well as the method from the other book. And the other book is called Canoe Craft by Ted Morris, kind of combining the techniques from both of them to create this canoe. But kind of the neat thing about this is just get started. Just get started and do it. I've been reading about this for about 8 or 9 months now. And it's time to get started. So we'll see how this goes. And that's it. Here's the frame for, or the template for frames 4 and 6. And you would be looking at it upside down. This is the bottom of the boat, and then this is the side of the boat. And this is half the frame. So I'll put it on a piece of plywood to cut out the actual frame, and I will trace this out, and then I will flip it over this way, and there's the other half. And if that still doesn't make sense, it will make sense once I do it. As you just saw, I did one half, and then I flipped it over and did the other half. And this is one of the stations. I'll now cut this out with the jigsaw and the circular saw, and then I'll sand to the lines. And that becomes my template for these 2 stations. And these are stations... Actually, this is the center. This is station 5. So station 5. And this will go right in the center of the canoe. Time to make some sawdust. I've spent several months now researching how to do this. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. There's a lot of videos out there on cedar strip canoes. Read a couple of books. And basically just got myself ready to begin this project. This is going to be, I think, perhaps my biggest project. And we're finally to the point where it's time to make some sawdust. I'm going to cut this form out, and then I'm going to trace and cut out all the other forms. I'll probably record a little bit of it, but essentially this is the first step in establishing the forms. And then I'm going to transfer that over to 3/4 inch plywood. And then I'm going to mill up all of my lumber. And then I'm going to build the strong back table. We'll see that in a little bit. Once that's done, I'm going to take over this whole garage, and Lisa's not going to be able to park in here. If I had a larger workshop, I would probably have built the strong back first, and then the forms, gotten them all established, and the stock I would have milled as soon as I had gotten it. So I would be ready to go. But this is, being done in stages with the room that I have available.
where I lost you.
And there it is. That's form 5. That'll be the very center of the canoe. I got a little ahead of myself. I cut out the forms in 1/4-inch plywood. And then I took that and I traced some of it. I took an entire sheet of plywood. I didn't get all of the forms traced on it, but I traced the forms onto 3/4-inch plywood. And what I end up with is a slightly oversized form. Now I could have double-sided taped this to the plywood, but I just elected to screw it to the plywood. And now what I'm going to do is take my router table. Let me bring you in close for this. And you can see here that there's a bearing. That bearing will ride on the 1/4-inch piece of plywood, and the router bit will trim flush to the 1/4-inch sheet of plywood, and that should make the 3/4-inch sheet of plywood exactly the same as the 1/4-inch sheet of plywood. So I'm going to get things set up a little bit more and we'll get started. I just found out my auto shutoff isn't working, so that's a real pain. But as you can see, I trimmed it to match this form, and this will be the center of the canoe. I should say this will be the center form for the canoe. Quarter-inch plywood form, 3/4-inch plywood form. And now I'll just continue doing that with the other sizes. Like I said, I don't have enough 3/4-inch plywood. I only got one sheet. When I went to pick up the plywood, I was actually sick, and I could barely pick up the plywood, 3/4-inch plywood and the quarter sheet of plywood at the hardware store. When I got out to my truck, I couldn't lift it into my truck, and a very nice lady was walking by, and she offered to help me lift it up into my truck. I got it into the truck, I unloaded it from the truck, and I went to bed. And I really hadn't done much with it.